Administering California's state government is the responsibility of the executive branch. Administering the branch and providing overall political leadership for the entire state falls on the governor. In Chapter 8, we survey the office of the governor, other executive offices, plus a sizable bureaucracy, all of whom compete for power and leadership in the Golden State. We're going to be talking about how governors lead, governors' duties and powers, the plural executive, someone competing for power, California's bureaucracy, and the politics of diversity. First, how governors lead. State governors perform many of the same tasks as American presidents. That's certainly true in California. It's a complex pattern of political leadership. The governor is at the top of the political system and is more powerful than any individual. The executive branch represents the state's population, yet the branch also exhibits its own form of hyperpluralism, has diluted and shared power, politically independent offices and agencies, many avenues for interest group influence, resulting in numerous roadblocks to leadership. Quick look at California governors from 1849. The state constitution limits the governor's powers. Couple of points to keep in mind. Few early governors are memorable to contemporary Californians. California governorship has been a rapidly revolving door, and the lengthy service of governor is a recent phenomenon. The two-term limit for governors, that's a relatively recent phenomenon that governors serve 8 years. Annual salary of the governor is $173,562. That's among the nation's highest. Number of variables that affect the leadership for the governor. Governor's personality, his political skill, his political resources, what he has available to him politically. The factors in the environment, the political context, such as the economy. What's the electorate's ideology? What's the public's confidence in the future of California? And there are also strategic considerations, whether you're looking at large-scale infrastructure projects like Governor Brown is proposing today with high-speed rail and the Delta tunnels, or the master plan for education. Take a look at the governor's powers and duties, his executive powers, budget leadership, legislative powers, judicial powers, and some other powers he has. The executive powers, he organizes his personal staff. He makes appointments to various administrative board and commission posts, and also judicial posts. He manages the executive branch. If you take a look at figure 8.1 in your text, that shows the bureaucracy that he manages. And the governor can also issue executive orders. Governor Brown, for instance, issued an order mandating a 50% cut in cell phone and smartphone use by government agencies. He also has budget leadership responsibilities. He's required to submit a budget to the legislature in the first 10 days of the calendar year. The budget is something that requires the governor's constant attention. The internal budget process, that starts in the previous July. The governor submits a budget price letter to all agencies and departments. The budget letter contains his policy priorities. The price letter contains fiscal assumption. That starts the internal process, how departments and agencies look at the budget and see what kind of resources they can get in the governor's proposal. Once the budget is submitted, it pits the governor against the legislature. Governors sharing power with the Assembly Budget Committee, State Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, and the Legislative Analyst's Office. Part of the external budget process, negotiations between the governor and leaders of the Democratic and Republican caucuses in the Senate and Assembly. That's what's known as the Big Five, the governor and those four leaders. The legislature enacts the budget by June 15, and the governor is to sign the budget by June 30th each year. Once the budget is passed, the governor who's given up some powers or shares powers during the negotiation process has some power through the line item veto, where he can veto particular items in the budget. Governor's legislative powers, a number of areas that produce conflict, that there are party differences. You see divided government, mainly in recent years, Republican governor, Democratic legislature. You've seen clashes on taxes, welfare spending, many other issues. Constituency differences. The governor represents the entire state. Legislators represent a particular district in the state. You have interest differences. The governor represents larger interests. Legislators may be more responsive to individual interest groups, and clearly responsibility differences along the same lines. The governor responsible to the entire state, legislators to a particular district. Here are the governor's legislative powers quickly. Governor presents a legislative program, generally through a State of the State address and also through media events. Also legislatively, the governor can veto a bill. He can reject entire bills. He can call special sessions that deal with pressing matters. For instance, Governor Schwarzenegger called a special session on prison overcrowding. And the governor also has some power through personal relations in the legislative arena. So Governor Reagan cultivated the press corps. Governors Warren and Pat Brown had good relations with the media to advance their legislative agenda. And Governor Schwarzenegger, with his popularity at some point in his term, he could go public, go directly to the public to get them to support his legislative agenda as well, and get them to pressure the legislature. The governor has judicial powers. He has appointment power, California Supreme Court, courts of appeal. He can also fill vacancies at the Superior Court level. He also has the power of clemency. He has powers of pardon, commutation, reprieves, reversing parole decisions, and the extradition of fugitives to other states. And in the judicial arena, the governor, along with the attorney general, also decides which court cases the state will pursue at the appellate level. Other powers. The governor is commander-in-chief of the California National Guard. He can send troops in for local riots or disturbances. One of the more recent ones, Governor Schwarzenegger sent 1,000 troops to the California-Mexico border to help federal border enforcement. Governor is also chief of state, welcomes foreign dignitaries, addresses interest group conventions, accompanies presidents traveling in California, things like that. But the governor is really one of an array of executive officials who are separately elected and politically independent. That's the hyper-pluralism we see. The lieutenant governor, probably the least threatening of the other elected officials, at least to the governor. The lieutenant governor sits on various boards. He becomes acting governor when the governor leaves the state. And only 6 lieutenant governors had become governor. And reformers would really like to abolish this position because of the lack of substantive power and responsibilities. The Attorney General, on the other hand, is quite powerful, considered the second most powerful position in state government. So Governors Warren, both Browns, Deukmejian, all served as Attorney General. Attorney General has responsibilities in criminal matters and civil matters as well, as you can see. Secretary of State, essentially a clerk of records and elections. Some of the responsibilities include preparing and distributing statewide voter pamphlets, processing candidate papers, certifying initiative petitions, publishing election results, responsibilities such as those. Superintendent of Public Instruction, officially a nonpartisan position, the only nonpartisan executive branch position. But this position really shares responsibility with the State Department of Education, State Board of Education. And even though 80% of school funding flows through that office, the actual task of education takes place in local school districts. You also have the insurance commissioner. You can see the responsibilities there. Other fiscal officers, state controller, state treasurer, state board of equalization. You can see their responsibilities there as well. Let's just spend a minute talking about the state bureaucracy. Roughly 350,000 state employees, about 130,000 are governed by the UC-CSU tenure and hiring practices. Most of the rest are appointed or hired through the civil service process, and the majority work in either the two university systems or in the public safety area, prisons, highway patrol, Department of Justice, and the court system. The state's bureaucracy, the primary purpose is implementation. It carries out policy and laws approved by the legislature and voters. Except in higher education, most coordinate activities with similar local government agencies. Bureaucracy shares power with the federal government, and most federal aid passes through the agencies, sort of a picket fence where the communication goes up and down the line between those levels of government. And finally, there's been some talk about executive branch reform. There are about 340 separate boards and commissions that share power with the executive branch. Governor Schwarzenegger had a report. He had 275 people in the California Performance Review produced a report, called for eliminating 12,000 jobs, abolishing 118 boards and commissions, and streamlining other agencies. Not much progress in that area. Governor Brown in 2012 did have some success with reform, eliminated more than 50 boards, commissions, and other entities that saved $10 million. Please use this PowerPoint as well as the other information in your course documents to prepare for your weekly quiz. Good luck.